according to the woman who would cut her hands open to get his attention. Lord Byron was mad, bad, and dangerous to know. But what made him so notorious? Lord Byron is famous for being one of the most impactful poets of all time, but his personal life was a whirlwind of scandals, passion, and rebellion. After lengthy research, we've uncovered layers of complexity that will redefine your understanding of the famous poet. Few people in history reached a level of greatness, revered worship, and adoration that Lord Byron attained during his short lifetime. His influence and stories spread from Armenia to Greece and from England to Switzerland, but you wouldn't guess his eventuality from his troubled childhood. Lord Byron was born George Gordon Byron in 1788. His mother was a rich heiress from Scotland, and his father was a thrill-seeking heartthrob who went by the name Mad Jack. It doesn't take a lot to be called Mad Jack, but Lord Byron's father, John Byron, wore it like a badge of honor. He spent all his time and money on elaborate parties, gambling, and lewdness. He married his first wife after snatching her from her first marriage, and there were rumors he married Lord Byron's mother for her inheritance. He abandoned her and his son and died somewhere in France at 34 years old. Lord Byron's father wasn't present for his birth, but the boy had a remarkable resemblance to him. He had a gorgeous face that would serve him well through his life and draw attention away from his clubfoot. Lord Byron, all bad and dangerous, was born with clubfoot, a condition that made one or both feet look like the end of a club, making it a bit difficult to walk like other people would. While the condition can be treated now without surgery, in 1800s, it wasn't so easily managed. Lord Byron and many others like him suffered great physical and emotional pain because of the condition. For most of his early life, Byron lived with his mother and they shared a weird relationship. His mother, Catherine Gordon, never saw herself as a mother figure and wasn't sure how to handle her boy alone. On one day, she'd showered him with money and consult doctors for his clubfoot. The next, she'd make a mockery of his condition, calling him a lame brat. Lord Byron was very shy about his clubfoot, and she knew he'd tried to hide it by walking funny or wearing bogus boots, but it still haunted him, even on his deathbed. His mother had lost a great deal of her fortune thanks to Mad Jack, but tried to make ends meet and give her son a life expected of a man of his social standing. Her mood swings and wavering nature would come to define Lord Byron's life. He'd get fat, then thin, be charming, then gross, be loved, and then hated. While his mother danced the fine lines of bankruptcy, George struggled to make sense of all the drama that was about to flood his teenage years. When he was about 9, his mother employed a babysitter for him, called Mary Gray. By day, Mary Gray was a committed Christian who instilled her doctrines on Byron, but by night, she turned into a drunk who molested and beat him senseless. This rare blend of Christianity and sex with torture tore Byron apart, but that was only the beginning. By the time he turned 10, he received word that his uncle, a man so vile he was called Lord Byron the Wicked, had died and passed all his possessions and titles to him, including the ancestral home of the Byrons, Newstead Abbey. George Byron, now 6th Baron Byron of Rochdale, had struck untold fortune overnight, and his mother drove her son from Scotland to Newstead, beaming with pride. However, when they got there, Newstead Abbey had fallen into ruin. The wicked Lord Byron had wasted much of the family's fortune and left his home in disrepair. Nevertheless, it belonged to George, and now he loved it. As if bewitched by its grandeur, George fell under a spell of wastefulness and extravagance that crippled the Byrons before him. In a bid to get some money from the property, his mother agreed to lease it out to Henry Edward, the 19th Baron Grey de Ruthyn, for 5 years. What she didn't know was that Henry was more interested in her son than in the property. This was Byron's first exposure to homosexuality, and while he was disgusted by it at first, all that would change when he went to Harrow School in 1801. At Harrow, Lord Byron met Mary Chawat, the first woman he ever had a passion for. He was madly in love with her, but she didn't share the same emotions. She was his cousin and was already engaged. But her refusal only made him desire her more. His experience with Mary Chaworth created what would be his trademark and his legacy. He imagined himself a hero who was adored by many, but hated by the ones he truly cared about. He refused to return to school for a year, as he was devastated by Mary's rejection. When he returned, Harrow had changed, and so had Lord Byron. He diverted his love for Mary to an interest in the many young and handsome boys that flocked the hallways of Harrow, engaging in sexual activities with anyone that piqued his interest. The following year, he left Harrow for Trinity College in Cambridge. There, Lord Byron gave into his most intimate desires and let them roam freely at the risk of his life. England didn't tolerate homosexuality, and anyone caught or suspected of the act was hung publicly. The danger surrounding homosexuality in England only fed Lord Byron's passion, and he got close to John Edelston and John Cam Hobhouse at Trinity College. When he was not in school, Lord Byron stayed at his mother's house in Southwell. It was during these times that he started writing poetry. His first collection of poems, written when he was only 17, was so dirty that every copy made was recalled and burned. He'd later release some of these poems in his first official work, Hours of Idleness, a decision that would prove to be good and bad. Bad because the critics didn't spare the young man. They tore his work apart with objections so bad it pushed Byron to release what was his first masterpiece in 1809, English Bards and Scotch Reviewers, a satire criticizing all the critics and poets in London. English Bards and Scotch Reviewers were so good and accurate that it became the only thing anyone was talking about. It also got him death threats, and many of the people he had ridiculed asked to duel him. It was around this time that Lord Byron entered the House of Lords, but his interests weren't in politics. Remember previously we said Lord Byron became wasteful? Yeah, that didn't go away. Like his father and uncle, Lord Byron burned through loads of cash in a very short time. His spending habit quickly caught up with him, and he owed a lot of money. To avoid his creditors, he decided to run away on a grand tour that would change the direction of his life. A grand tour, like the one Lord Byron took, was customary for men of his class. He got most of the funds for this expedition from his half-sister, from his father's first marriage. Her name was Augusta Lee, and she had formed a deep connection with her charming brother. Lord Byron travelled with his friend John Cam Hobhouse and had an entourage of servants follow him. He chose to tour Europe after hearing about their relatively liberal morality towards homosexuality, and also hoped to meet with his beloved Mary Chaworth somewhere in Europe. Lord Byron sailed through Portugal to Italy, Malta, Albania, and Greece. During his travels, he engaged in numerous sexual adventures that England had held back. He never felt more alive, as he wrote the first 2 cantos on the piece that would make him truly famous, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. He released the poem in 1812, and it sold 10,000 copies in the first week. It made Lord Byron a celebrity almost overnight, and soon, all of England entered into Byromania. Everyone wanted a piece of the man, and he was more than willing to oblige. He partied, gambled, and whored to his heart's content. He got invited to some very exclusive clubs and produced more excellent pieces during his stay in England. It was at this time that he entered a dangerous liaison with Lady Caroline Lamb. Lady Caroline was the one who said that Lord Byron was mad, bad, and dangerous to know. But in reality, she couldn't stay away from him. If Lord Byron had any unique sexual cravings, Lady Caroline was a willing participant. She'd cross-dress and debase herself in many ways, all for his pleasure. It wasn't enough for the wild and wandering spirit that is Lord Byron, and he craved something more after a while. His opportunity would come when he'd finally meet his half-sister, whom he had been in correspondence with for a very long time. The pair had grown very fond of each other and enjoyed each other's company a bit too much. At least, that's what Lord Byron's enemies thought. Rumours, most of which were spread by a bitter Lady Caroline, started to spread. Lord Byron was accused of sleeping with his married half-sister. This wasn't Caroline's only attempt to get back at Byron for ditching her. It is said that she stalked him at social events, broke a glass, and cut her hands in front of him. Another story is that she would often do disguises and dress up as odd characters to get Byron's attention. Instead, the young lord busied himself with his half-sister. When the rumours began to gain some more backing, Byron figured his time was running out. He had to do something fast. He was losing face and money in England, so he devised a way to get out of both problems at a go. His solution shocked everyone in England because the famous playboy and womanizer George Byron had decided to get married. He didn't beat around the bush in his decision. He desired a wealthy heiress, and he so wanted Anna Milbank. However, if Caroline, a helpless romantic, was a perfect match for him, Annabel was the opposite. She was a mathematician with a kind heart and good nature. She fought against slavery for most of her life and established the first industrial school in England. She and Byron had a daughter, Ada Lovelace, who would become famous for setting the foundation for computer programming and helping Charles Babbage create the analytical engine. Anna and Byron didn't make it past a year, as many had predicted. They were very different people, and even Byron knew that the marriage was doomed from the beginning. He made life a living hell for his young wife, flirting and betting actresses while Anna was pregnant. Rumor has it that she lost her patience for the handsome Baron when he suggested a threesome with her and his half-sister, Augusta. Other sources say that the tales of Baron and Augusta's incests were too loud for Anna to ignore. A month after delivering her child, she divorced Lord Byron. The news of his incest, maltreatment, and divorce from his wife angered the locals. Baron was now seen in a new light or darkness. If all that wasn't enough, his creditors were searching for him again. He had incurred more debt. The icing on the cake came when Lady Caroline Lamb published her novel, Clavernon, a book that had Lord Byron as its focus of ridicule. She suggested that Lord Byron engaged in homosexuality and even confessed that she cross-dressed to satisfy his same-sex longings on many occasions. This was the last straw. Lord Byron feared that even with his high social standing, he would not be spared. Next, news started spreading that he was going to get lynched. A group of vigilantes called the Bow Street Runners had already made an example of suspected gay men, hanging 3 of them publicly. England had turned its back on Byron, and he fled the country, vowing to never return. His Harriet trip didn't prevent him from travelling in style. He left England with his physician, John Poldery, and several exotic animals, including a falcon. One of his lovers in England, Claire Clermont, heard that her beloved Baron was sailing for Switzerland, so she pressed her stepsister, Mary Goodwin, and her fiancé, Perry Shelley, to join Lord Byron in England so she could be with him. They met Lord Byron in Switzerland, and the 5 of them had life-changing experiences there. While living at the Villa Diodati by Lake Geneva, Mary Goodwin would write Frankenstein. Paul Dorey would create the romantic vampire in his short story Vampire. Percy wrote some of his best work, and Lord Byron wrote the 3rd canto of Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. While in Geneva, Claire bore a child for Lord Byron, a girl named Allegra, but he dismissed them and was responsible for the child's death at the age of 5. He wasn't a very good father. Byron grew bored of the easy life in Switzerland and desired a romantic adventure. Luckily for him, he was born in a time that had a surplus of that. His longings saw him travel to Italy. There, he fell in love with the owner of the lodge where he stayed. Her name was Mariana Segatti. She was married and older than the still young and spiteful lord with a clubfoot, but he didn't care. It was just how he liked it, mad, bad, and dangerous. course, he grew tired of Mariana and moved on to the younger Margherita Cogni. Though only 22, she too was married when Byron seduced her and snatched her from her husband. He got tired of her too, but when he asked her to leave, she jumped into a canal instead. His next victim was Teresa Guccoli, 21, and married. He met her in Ravenna and stayed there for 3 years to be close to her. When he finally left Ravenna for Pisa, Teresa left her husband to be with him. During this time, he joined forces with Guccoli's father, Count Gamba, and his son Pietro. They led a revolutionary army, but were quickly put down and exiled, only allowed to return if they abandoned Byron. When Byron left Italy, Teresa wept greatly, almost as if she knew disaster lay ahead. For most of his time in Europe, Byron focused on his writing and satisfying his many pleasures. He continued to grow in wealth and power, as well as releasing greater works of literature that rocked literary circles all over the world. However, it was only when Byron published Don Juan that he gained immortality. Byron had risen to the peak of his career as a poet, but fate had one more task for him. One that would tie up his existing saga into a nice ribbon as if it was a movie straight out of Hollywood. However, this task would spell his doom. A taste for adventure and daring pulled Lord Byron to Greece. It would be his last trip, as the young lord drew his last breath somewhere in Missolonghi. When he arrived at the city, he was greeted by Alexandros Mavrokordatos, who had begged him to help free the Greeks from the brutal rule of the Turks. Alexandros had heard tales of his wealth and fortune and hoped that he could get some support from him. But he got even more. He got a military commander. Lord Byron styled himself a general, leading a small army against the Turks. He was devoted and sold several properties to help the Greek cause. He formed the Byron Brigade, which consisted of 200 men and 30 officers. Byron's duties on the field didn't stop him from having another companion in Lucas Kalandrisanos. He spent a great deal to impress the young man, spending as much as £24,600. But Lucas rejected Byron's advances. Lord Byron spent a great amount of effort and fortune trying to free Greece from Ottoman rule, and he is still rewarded as a national hero in the country. But while on his expedition in Greece, Byron caught a fever that would kill him. Many physicians were brought to treat the ailment, but their efforts only made it worse. He died on the 19th of April, 1824, a hero to some and a villain to others. When news of his death reached London a full month after he had passed, the country was shocked by the news. He had grown to be one of those celebrities you never imagined dying. With his troubled life, many sexual escapades, adventures, and spellbinding poems, Byron embodied the Byronic hero that has inspired many movies, stories, and poems. It was probably all he ever wanted.